Eu tenho o som a sair do computador, por isso, se calhar, se falares, se calhar dá para ouvir na gravação.
Dos grandes obstáculos nascem a força e a vontade de os superar. Uma força maior que a soma das partes, que desafia a criatividade, a disponibilidade e a solidariedade. Os portugueses, quando chamados a lutar por si e pelos seus, nunca desapontaram. E perante um novo inimigo comum, as soluções urgem e os esforços unem-se. É assim que nasce o movimento Tag for Covid-19. Conscientes de que os profissionais de saúde se encontram na linha da frente, pretendemos, através das mais variadas competências envolvidas neste movimento, apoiar e agilizar o combate a esta pandemia. Em menos de 48 horas, uma conversa informal entre fundadores de startups tecnológicas portuguesas transformou-se numa equipa de mais de 600 pessoas, de 120 empresas diferentes das mais variadas áreas de atividade, com um objetivo comum: unir o talento português no desenvolvimento de soluções tecnológicas que ajudem a população a ultrapassar o desafio do Covid-19. Não somos mais B2B ou B2C. Somos H to H, human to human.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to today's webinar. My name is Jessica and I'm a product designer at Pixelmatters. And today we're going to be talking about e-commerce and how UX can impact conversions, because e-commerce has obviously been growing a lot in the past few years, but recently, since we're all spending so much time at home, I'm sure you've noticed companies are really focusing a lot more on it. And even we as users and as consumers, we are each day we're seeking out opportunities to have better shopping experiences online. So here is what we're going to be discussing today. So we're going to quickly touch up on what is your user experience, as I'm sure you know, but it would be great to go over it in a context of e-commerce. And then throughout the whole presentation, I'm going to be referring to a project that I was actually part of on Pixelmatters recently, and it was an e-commerce project. It was really interesting because we actually had the opportunity to work with a client that had a new brand. So we were part of the whole process since its conception. So we're going to be talking about the whole process up until we ship the final design to development. So that includes understanding the brand, the product, and the consumer, then moving on to what technology we're going to be using, doing some benchmarks and flow maps, finally some wireframes, and the final UI phase. So what is user experience? I was reading the Lean UX book, and I came across this sentence, which I think is quite short, but it really represents well what user experience is. So it states that it's the sum total of all the interactions a user has with your product and service. And if you think about it, if the experience is about all of the interactions that the customer or the user has with your product, then the relation to how much we can convert in an online shop through user experience becomes really quite evident. So on an e-commerce context, providing a good experience means that we have to make this transition as easy and natural as we possibly can. So when you're shopping online, you have a browsing mindset. You kind of know you want to buy something, you might not know what it is, But our job is to make this transition from someone maybe wanting a product to deciding to buy it and saying, I just got that. So we need to make this transition as seamless as possible. And if you've never worked on e-commerce before, or even if you have, it's always good to touch up on good practices. And obviously, this is because learning and defining everything from scratch isn't really a productive use of our time, especially given that e-commerce has been around for years. And this is actually very good for us because it means that throughout all of these years, it has evolved in a way that we can see the iterations its process has suffered throughout the years, and we can take that and take those good practices and understand why some industry standards are the way they are, how they became that way. And once we understand and have this knowledge base, we can actually have some space to innovate on top of them, because process is iterative and nothing is permanent. So we need to remember all of these good practices started through an iteration process, which is what we're going to be working with anyway. So after we have a base knowledge of what e-commerce is and what are the industry standards, we really need to align that with our brand that we're going to be working with. And as I mentioned, we worked with a client that was kind of building up a whole brand from scratch. So we didn't really have a solid user base because the brand didn't exist yet. So we had to do some market research. And in these kind of cases where you don't really have users to make real tests with, you should create proto personas. So we went ahead and we did market research based on other companies that were selling the same kind of product and what kind of things people that were using this product were saying. But actually something interesting came at this point of the project for us, because even though this brand was new and was started from scratch, our client actually had a sister brand that sold a different, similar type of product, which meant that our user base could be quite similar. So we had the opportunity to perform a user survey with those clients. And this was really a key moment for us in the process, because some of the assumptions we had before for our proto personas regarding the motivation for buying the product that we gathered with research throughout the internet were actually not 100% accurate. And the motives that people were wanting to buy this product were actually were a bit different than we expected. And so this was key for us, because it meant that now we really understood the why and the motivation of users that were to become our customers. And the reason why someone buys something is the most important thing for us to know if we really want to sell well. So this knowledge helped us niche down and focus on the brand and the website into something that actually resonated with our clients' needs. So now that we had everything aligned, so our customers' needs, we had to align them with the brand's needs, with some basic e-commerce knowledge. But before we can actually start designing anything, we need to know what technology we're going to be using and how we're actually going to build this. So it's really important early on to understand the technical constraints that we might have, depending on the platform that we're going to use to build this. For e-commerce, there's several popular platforms like Magento or Shopify, WooCommerce, and each of them have their own advantages and disadvantages. So for this project, we were using Shopify, and we maintained an open communication with the team developing the designs really early on. And this was really crucial to our process, because it allowed us to keep the design as close to idealized as possible from the beginning, and it allowed us to remove time-consuming iterations early on, because obviously not the designers and not the developers it's like it, and it's very frustrating when we get to a final stage on the design mockups and we need to change something that because of technical constraints. And so if it affects design, it affects the user experience, and it's a really great opportunity to tackle this early on. So next step in our process is benchmark, because at this point we've done so much research and we have a really good theoretical base. So we understand the practices of e-commerce, we understand our customers, but this is all in theory. So now we really need to see what is actually happening out there in practice. And we should analyze our competitors, but we shouldn't just stick only to that. We can analyze other successful online shops and e-commerce giants like Amazon and really try to understand what they're doing and why it's working. So for the benchmark process, you can tackle it and you can have a lot of different approaches. For me, I'm a very visual person, so the method that works best for me is to take a lot of screenshots and annotate on top of them. So this really allows you to have an analytical mindset, because at this point, you're gonna question basically everything that you see. You're gonna try to understand why things are where they are in the order that they are, and try to understand if they're achieving their intended purpose. So you can go as far as you want with these annotations and these insights, or as far as your scope allows. But I think it's really valuable because you start to question a lot of things. For example, if a newsletter pop-up model that we usually see in the beginning when we enter a website, is it actually helping conversions because it helps us build an email list, or is it hurting conversions because it's kind of hurting user experience by breaking the flow? So after you analyze a lot of different websites, you're gonna start noticing a lot of patterns. For instance, this page that I'm showing you right now, it's a category page. And after seeing a lot of competitors, I started noticing that they didn't really provide the option to toggle between a grid and a list view for the products in the category page and in the search results pages. And I actually had assumed that this would be a feature that we had to develop. So I started questioning myself why they weren't offering this. And I realized the businesses that were actually offering the list view had product cards that needed to be very detailed. So if you think about it, going back to our previous premise of we need to make the transition from wanting a product to buying a product as easy as possible. At this point, the user enters the website with a browsing mindset, and humans are very visual, so they're first going to see the images and then they're going to read the title or the price. And at this point, we really want to make the browsing experience as seamless as possible, and having a grid view full of images and a really image-heavy interface is going to allow us to kind of go through them a little bit easier and take better advantage of screen real estate than if we had a listing view with rows and a lot of detailed information. So obviously not everything that you're gonna notice is gonna be patterns. You're gonna see a lot of different approaches. And you really need to start questioning them based on best practices, but also based on your own experience while navigating these websites. For instance, these are different approaches taken to layered navigation. And remember, you can't assume anything as definitive or timeless, because just because something is working for someone else, it doesn't mean that in your particular context it's gonna work. For instance, this is the menu and the footer that Amazon has. And obviously Amazon is very complex. And if our website is very minimal, it really doesn't make sense to have a really big sidebar menu and a really big footer. So always remember that just because something is working somewhere else, it doesn't mean it's going to work in your particular context, and you should adapt. All right, so now that we have done so much research, we are already forming a mental picture of what our website is going to look like. And before we move on to the design and the wireframes, I think flow maps are really a useful tool and a really useful exercise, because it helps you to understand how the user is gonna, where he's coming from and how he can get to the next point. So this will help us identify the friction points in the user journey, and it will also give us a comprehensive list of necessary design components. One little thing that I try to remember always in flow maps is that the user always needs somewhere to go. They always need a next step. Even in pages where you didn't think that they would need. For instance, if you're looking at the sorry, at the 404 page, are you just displaying an error message, or are you leading them somewhere? Or after you get the confirmation, when you finish the purchase, are you just staying there, or are you giving them design elements that will take them somewhere else on the website? Because obviously you want to keep users browsing through your website, and the longer they browse through it, then the more engaged they are in the whole experience. All right, so now that we have the design components and a mental image in our head of what this website is going to look like, we can start actually designing and going for the wireframes. And we really need to understand which is the best approach depending on your context. It might be low-fi fidelity wireframes or high-fidelity wireframes. And in our case, for this project, we sort of ended up going for a mid-fidelity wireframe because the brand, because it was a new brand, it wasn't yet defined. So we didn't have a logo, we didn't have typeface colors, but we did have knowledge about our users. So we knew the brand's purpose, we knew the customers' needs, and that allowed us to understand the tone. And so this was enough for us to really know what sort of structure we should go for. And so we could do the wireframes with this knowledge. And the fact that we prepared so much in advance for this, because obviously we started designing now, but we did so much research. And this is really beneficial because when we're going through the final stage of the design to the UI, as you can see, not much has changed because the structure was already there, and we took a lot of the big decisions early on in the process. And what that means is that the client already knows how the website's going to work, but now we can really start focusing on the visuals and the micro interactions. Sorry. And so here, obviously, because wireframes are not super high fidelity, we can still make some small UX decisions. We can change the structure if we find out that it no longer makes sense in a particular context. But mostly, we have already taken the difficult decisions, and now we can focus on really honing the product and refining every last detail. So then we're actually ready for the handoff for the developers. And now that the whole process is done, from ideation to final design mockups, I want you to remember that context is everything. So, we really need to understand if solutions found elsewhere are really the best option for us. And if needed, we should innovate, because good practices are an iterative process. And if you find out that, maybe some competitor is doing a certain thing, but while you're working on your project, you find that you might have a better solution, you should try it, because obviously everything we did until now, we did our best effort, but we're really going to see the results once the product is in the market. And once we can test it, we can really see if our hypotheses are correct. And, best practices, they're an iterative process, because technology really evolves much faster than we can adapt to it. So who knows if your innovation in a few years will be part of industry standards. And so with this, I leave you. Thank you so much for coming. And if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email. Yeah, that's it.